Can a soul split or merge? The Hidden Debate on Identity and Consciousness by David Russo. What if the you experience is not a single, stable thing, but something that can fragment, overlap, and even blend with another mind? Introduction. For as long as humans have asked what happens after death, one question keeps resurfacing in different forms across religions, philosophies, and modern science. What is a soul? And can it split, merge, or change ownership? Some traditions describe souls as eternal and indivisible. Others suggest layered selves, shared consciousness, reincarnation, or even spiritual union between beings. Meanwhile, neuroscience and psychology challenge the idea of a soul entirely, replacing it with brain-based identity and subjective experience. So what's actually going on here? Are we dealing with spiritual reality, metaphor, psychological projection, or something we don't yet understand? This exploration doesn't try to declare a final answer. Instead, it examines how different systems of thought approach the idea of a soul that can divide, blend, or transform, and what that reveals about the mystery of being conscious at all. Chapter 1. What do we mean by soul? The question of whether a soul can split or merge begins with a more fundamental challenge, defining what a soul actually is. Across human history, the concept has appeared in nearly every culture. Yet there is no universally accepted definition. For some, the soul is the essence that makes a person alive. For others, it is a seat of consciousness, the source of moral character, or the immortal aspect of a being that survives physical death. Because the term carries so many meanings, discussions about the soul often involve people talking about very different things while using the same word. In many ancient traditions, the soul was understood as the animating force behind life itself. The distinction between a living body and a dead one seemed to imply the presence of something invisible that departed at death. This life-giving principle appeared in the religious beliefs of Egypt, Greece, India, and countless indigenous cultures. Although these traditions disagreed about the soul's nature and destiny, they often shared the belief that human existence involved more than physical matter alone. Other philosophical traditions emphasize the soul as the core of personal identity. In this view, the soul is what makes you uniquely you, despite the constant changes your body and mind undergo throughout life. Memories fade, beliefs evolve, and cells are continually replaced. Yet a sense of continuity remains. Many thinkers have argued that this enduring identity points to some deeper aspect of existence that persists beneath the shifting surface of experience. Modern discussions often connect the soul with consciousness itself. Consciousness, the subjective experience of being aware, remains one of the most profound mysteries in science and philosophy. Some argue that the soul is simply another name for conscious awareness, while others maintain that consciousness emerges from physical processes in the brain and requires no separate spiritual component. This disagreement sits at the heart of many debates about human nature, free will, and what happens after death. The diversity of these interpretations reveals why questions about soul splitting or merging are so difficult to answer. If the soul is an indivisible spiritual substance, then division may be impossible. If it is a stream of consciousness, a pattern of information, or a collection of psychological processes, then concepts such as fragmentation or integration become more plausible. Before exploring whether souls can divide, unite, or transform, it is essential to recognize that the answer depends largely on what we mean by the word soul in the first place. Chapter 2. The Indivisible Soul in Classical Philosophy. Classical philosophy often treats the soul as a unified and indivisible reality. If the soul is not made of physical parts, then it cannot be broken apart in the way a material object can. This idea became influential in ancient Greek thought and later shaped many religious traditions that viewed the soul as the enduring core of a person. Under this framework, asking whether a soul can split is similar to asking whether a mathematical truth can be cut into pieces. It simply does not possess the kind of structure that allows division. The philosopher Plato argued that the soul belonged to a higher realm than the physical world. While he described different functions or aspects of the soul, he did not view these as separate souls inhabiting one body. Rather, they represented different tendencies within a unified spiritual reality. The soul's ultimate purpose was to seek truth and align itself with the realm of eternal forms, making it fundamentally distinct from material things. Later, philosophers such as Aristotle offered a different understanding but still maintained a strong sense of unity. For Aristotle, the soul was organizing principle that gave life and purpose to a living being. It was not a detachable object, but the essential form of a living creature. Although his view differed from Plato's, it also resisted the idea that a soul could be fragmented into separate entities. Many religious traditions inherited these philosophical assumptions. In Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, the soul is frequently understood as a singular creation of God. While individuals may experience inner conflict, temptation, or moral struggle, these are generally seen as conditions affecting one soul rather than evidence of multiple souls existing within a person. The soul remains fundamentally whole even when the personality feels divided. From this perspective, soul splitting is impossible because the soul is not composed of smaller components. Any apparent division would instead reflect changes in thought, emotion, or behavior rather than a literal separation of spiritual essence. Classical philosophy therefore establishes one of the strongest arguments against the possibility of soul dividing or merging. If the soul is simple and non-physical, then it cannot be broken apart or combined like material substances. Chapter 3. Eastern views layers instead of units. Many Eastern traditions approach identity in a way that differs significantly from the classical Western concept of a single indivisible soul. Rather than focusing on a permanent spiritual entity, these traditions often describe human existence as a collection of interconnected processes, energies, or layers of consciousness. This shift in perspective changes the entire discussion about what it means for a self to split, merge, or transform. In Hindu philosophy, the concept of Atman is sometimes described as the deepest essence of the individual. Yet, various schools interpret its relationship to the universe differently. Some traditions teach that the individual self is ultimately identical with a universal reality known as Brahman. In this view, the apparent separation between people may be more of an illusion than an ultimate truth. What appears to be individual consciousness may actually be part of a larger spiritual whole. Buddhism takes an even more radical approach by questioning the existence of a permanent self altogether. The doctrine of anatta, often translated as non-self, teaches that what we call a person is a constantly changing collection of physical and mental processes. Identity is viewed less as a fixed object and more as an ongoing stream of experiences. If there is no permanent soul, then the language of splitting and merging may be misleading from the beginning. Other Eastern systems describe multiple layers of consciousness, subtle bodies, or energetic structures that together create the experience of individuality. These layers may interact, evolve, or dissolve through spiritual practice. Such models can make identity appear more fluid than the rigid soul concepts found in some Western traditions. Transformation becomes less about changing a permanent essence and more about altering one's relationship to consciousness itself. Because these traditions often view identity as dynamic rather than fixed, they leave room for interpretations that resemble merging, continuity, or expansion of awareness. However, this does not necessarily mean that souls literally combine or divide. Instead, Eastern philosophies frequently challenge the assumption that there was ever a separate, permanent self to split in the first place. The question shifts from, can a soul divide, to what is the true nature of the self we believe is dividing? Chapter 4. Mystical Union and Soul Merging. Throughout history, mystics have described experiences that seem to transcend ordinary individuality. During intense states of prayer, meditation, contemplation, or spiritual ecstasy, people have reported feeling united with God, the universe, or a reality greater than themselves. These experiences often challenge conventional ideas about where the boundaries of the self begin and end. In Christian mysticism, saints and contemplatives frequently spoke of becoming united with the divine will. Their writings describe a profound intimacy with God that can feel like the disappearance of separation. Yet most Christian theologians maintain that the individual soul remains distinct even in the closest spiritual union. The experience is one of the perfect relationship rather than literal absorption. Similar themes appear within Sufism, the mystical dimension of Islam. Some Sufi poets wrote about losing themselves in divine love so completely that personal identity seemed to vanish. These descriptions are often highly symbolic, emphasizing spiritual transformation rather than metaphysical fusion. The language of merging serves as a way to express an experience that ordinarily concepts struggle to capture. Kabbalistic traditions within Judaism also contain ideas about the soul's connection to larger spiritual realities. Certain mystical teachings describe the human soul as participating in a vast network of divine emanations and spiritual relationships. In such frameworks, individuality and unity coexist in a complex balance rather than existing as simple opposites. The challenge is determining whether mystical union should be interpreted literally or metaphorically. For believers, These experiences may reveal a genuine spiritual reality in which consciousness participates in something greater than itself. Skeptics may view them as altered states generated by the brain. Either way, mystical traditions demonstrate that many people throughout history have encountered states of awareness that feel remarkably similar to what modern language might call soul merging, even if the deeper meaning remains open to interpretation. Chapter 5: Twin Flames and Modern Spiritual Narratives. In recent decades, modern spiritual communities have popularized the idea of twin flames, two individuals believed to share a profound spiritual connection that transcends ordinary relationships. Unlike the concept of soulmates, which can refer to multiple meaningful relationships throughout life, twin flame teachings often describe a single soul that has somehow manifested into two separate individuals. This idea has captivated many people because it offers a powerful explanation for intense emotional bonds and feelings of familiarity. Supporters of the twin flame concept often describe encounters that feel unusually significant. They report experiences of instant recognition, emotional mirroring, synchronized life events, and a sense that another person reflects aspects of themselves they cannot easily see. Such experiences can feel so powerful that they are interpreted as evidence of a shared spiritual origin rather than coincidence or psychology. The notion of one soul existing in two bodies raises difficult philosophical questions. If a soul can divide into separate individuals, what remains of personal identity? Would each person possess only part of their original soul, or would both contain the whole essence? These questions reveal how quickly the concept moves beyond emotional experience into complex metaphysical territory for which there are few clear answers. Critics argue that twin flame beliefs may sometimes encourage unhealthy relationship dynamics, intense attraction, emotional dependency, or cycles of conflict can be interpreted as signs of a cosmic connection rather than ordinary interpersonal challenges. Psychology offers alternative explanations, suggesting that powerful bonds may arise from attachment patterns, emotional needs, or projections of one's inner struggles onto another person. Regardless of whether twin flames represent spiritual reality or symbolic storytelling, the concept speaks to a universal human longing, the desire to feel deeply understood and connected. The language of shared souls may ultimately reflect an attempt to describe experiences of intimacy, self-discovery, and emotional transformation that are difficult to express through ordinary concepts alone. Chapter 6: Near-Death Experiences and Shared Consciousness Claims. Near-death experiences, often called NDES, have become one of the most frequently discussed phenomena in debates about consciousness and the soul. Individuals who have come close to death sometimes report vivid experiences that include leaving the body, moving through light-filled environments, encountering deceased loved ones, or experiencing a profound sense of unity with all existence. These reports have led some people to question whether consciousness can exist independently of the brain. One of the most striking elements of many NDE accounts is the description of expanded awareness. Experiencers often report feeling connected to an immense presence or intelligence that seems larger than individual identity. Some describe entering a state where personal boundaries dissolve and they feel united with humanity, nature, or the universe itself. Such accounts are frequently interpreted as evidence of consciousness merging with a greater reality. Others view these experiences differently. Neuroscientists point out that extreme physiological stress can produce unusual states of perception. Changes in oxygen levels, neurotransmitter activity, and brain function may contribute to experiences that feel profoundly real while remaining rooted in biological processes. The intensity of these events does not necessarily determine their ultimate cause. Another challenge is that near-death experiences vary significantly across cultures and individuals. While common themes exist, interpretations are often influenced by personal beliefs and expectations. A religious individual may perceive a divine encounter, while someone from a different worldview may interpret the same experience as a connection to universal consciousness or a purely neurological event. Despite ongoing debate, NDEs remain important because they reveal how deeply humans question the nature of awareness. Whether these experiences represent glimpses of an afterlife, encounters with a universal consciousness, or extraordinary brain states, they continue to challenge assumptions about identity and raise intriguing questions about whether consciousness is more interconnected than everyday experiences suggest. Chapter 7. Psychology and the Fragmented Self. Psychology approaches the question of fragmentation from a perspective very different from spiritual traditions. Rather than asking whether a soul can divide, psychologists examine how the mind can become compartmentalized under certain conditions. Human identity is not always experienced as a perfectly unified whole, and many psychological theories acknowledge the existence of conflicting aspects within the self. Trauma provides one of the clearest examples of psychological fragmentation. When individuals experience overwhelming events, the mind may separate memories, emotions, or perceptions in order to cope. The process known as dissociation can create the feeling that parts of one's experience have become disconnected from conscious awareness. To those undergoing it, the effect can feel profound and deeply unsettling. Certain psychological conditions further illustrate the complexity of identity. Dissociative disorders, for example, may involve disruptions in memory, self-perception, and continuity of experience. While popular culture sometimes portrays these phenomena as evidence of multiple souls or supernatural influence, psychology generally interprets them as adaptive responses to severe stress or trauma rather than metaphysical divisions. Even outside clinical contexts, many psychologists view the self as composed of multiple internal roles of perspectives. A person may simultaneously experience competing desires, values, and emotional reactions. Modern therapeutic approaches often help individuals recognize and integrate these different aspects rather than treating them as signs of a broken identity. From a psychological standpoint, what appears to be soul splitting may actually reflect the complexity of the human mind. The feeling of being divided is real, but it does not necessarily require a supernatural explanation. Instead, it highlights the remarkable ability of consciousness to adapt, compartmentalize, and reorganize itself in response to life's challenges. Chapter 8, Neuroscience and the Illusion of a Single Self. For centuries, people assumed that a stable, unified self existed somewhere within the mind. Neuroscience has complicated that assumption. Research increasingly suggests that what we experience as a single identity may actually emerge from the coordinated activity of numerous brain systems working together. Rather than discovering a central self-center, scientists have found networks responsible for memory, emotion, perception, decision-making, and self-awareness. This view presents the self as an ongoing process rather than a fixed entity. Every moment of experience is constructed from countless neural interactions occurring beneath conscious awareness. The feeling of being one continuous person may result from the brain's ability to integrate these processes into a coherent narrative. In this sense, identity resembles a story constantly being updated rather than a permanent object. Studies involving brain injuries, neurological disorders, and split brain patients have provided fascinating insights into the nature of selfhood. In some cases, damage to specific regions can dramatically alter personality, beliefs, or behavior. These findings suggest that aspects of identity once attributed to an immortal soul may be more dependent on physical brain structures than previously assumed. At the same time, neuroscience has not solved the mystery of consciousness itself. While researchers can identify neural correlate of awareness, explaining why subjective experience exists remains one of science's greatest challenges. Understanding how the brain generates consciousness is not the same as understanding consciousness completely. If identity emerges from dynamic brain activity, then the concept of a fixed soul becomes less straightforward. Questions about splitting or merging may need to be reframed in terms of information, memory, and conscious experience rather than spiritual substances. Neuroscience does not necessarily disprove the soul, but it challenges traditional assumptions about what a soul would need to be. Chapter 9, Thought Experiments, Copying, Merging, and Splitting Minds. Philosophers often use thought experiments to explore questions that science cannot yet test directly. Few topics generate more debate than the possibility of copying, transferring, or merging consciousness. These scenarios force us to confront difficult questions about identity and whether a soul, if one exists, could be duplicated. Imagine a machine capable of creating a perfect copy of your mind, complete with memories, personality, and emotions. The copy would believe itself to be you and would remember your life exactly as you do. But would it actually be you? If both versions continue existing separately, which one possesses the original identity? Another scenario involves merging two conscious minds into a single awareness. If two people combine their memories, experiences, and personalities into one consciousness, would a new person emerge? Or would one identity dominate while the other disappears? Such questions challenge our assumptions about individuality and continuality. These thought experiments become even more complicated when viewed through the lens of soul theories. If the soul is indivisible, perhaps only one version could possess it. If consciousness itself is the soul, perhaps each copy would be equally authentic. Different metaphysical systems produce dramatically different answers, revealing how dependent these questions are on prior beliefs. Although hypothetical, these scenarios help illuminate the deeper issues beneath discussions of soul splitting and merging. The real question may not be whether a soul can divide, but what makes a person the same person over time. Identity, continuity, and consciousness remain deeply mysterious, whether examined through philosophy, spirituality, or science fiction. Chapter 10. The Metaphor versus Literal Divide. Many discussions about soul splitting and merging assume these concepts describe literal events occurring within a spiritual realm. Yet another possibility is that such language functions primarily as metaphor. Human beings frequently use symbolic stories to express experiences that are emotionally powerful but difficult to describe in precise terms. People often speak of feeling as though a part of them died after a loss, or as though they became a completely different person following a major life event. These expressions do not usually refer to literal metaphysical changes. Instead, they capture profound transformations in identity, perspective, and emotional reality. Similarly, descriptions of souls merging may reflect experiences of intimacy, love, community, or spiritual connection. When individuals feel deeply understood or united by a shared purpose, ordinary language can seem inadequate. Metaphors of union and oneness provide a way to communicate these extraordinary states of relationship and belonging. Viewing soul concepts symbolically does not necessarily make them less meaningful. In many cases, metaphors reveal psychological truths that are just as important as literal claims. They help people organize experience, navigate grief, interpret transformation, and make sense of their place in the world. Ultimately, the distinction between metaphor and literal reality may itself be a part of the mystery. Some people see spiritual experiences as symbolic expressions of human psychology, while others regard them as glimpses of a deeper metaphysical truth. Either way, ideas about splitting and merging souls continue to resonate because they address enduring questions about identity, connection, and what it means to be conscious. Conclusion. The question of whether a soul can split or merge does not lead to a single, settled answer because it depends entirely on what framework is used to define reality itself. Across philosophy, religion, psychology, and neuroscience, the same human experiences are interpreted in radically different ways. What one tradition describes as a unified, indivisible essence, another may describe as a dynamic process, and another may dismiss as an emergent feature of the brain. If the soul is understood in the classical sense as a simple, non-physical substance, then it cannot be divided, duplicated, or combined without losing its essential definition. Within this view, the idea of splitting or merging belongs more to metaphor than to metaphysics. Identity remains singular, even when the human experience of identity feels conflicted or fragmented. If, however, consciousness is understood as layered, relational, or constructed, then the language of splitting and merging begins to resemble descriptions of real psychological or experiential phenomena. People change across time, integrate new relationships, internalize others, and sometimes experience profound shifts in identity that feel like transformation into someone else entirely. In that sense, merging may describe emotional or cognitive integration rather than the fusion of spiritual substances. From a scientific perspective, the self appears to be an ongoing process generated by the brain, shaped by memory, perception, and social interaction. This does not eliminate the mystery of consciousness. It intensifies it. Even if identity emerges from physical systems, this existence of subjective experience remains one of the deepest unanswered questions in science. The soul, reframed as consciousness, becomes less a fixed object and more an unfolding event. Ultimately, the debate is less about proving or disapproving a hidden spiritual mechanism and more about understanding how humans interpret the experience of being a self. Whether described as a soul, mind, or consciousness, what is being examined is the same phenomenon, the felt sense of I am. The language of splitting and merging may point not to literal division of an entity, but to the fluid, evolving nature of identity itself. In that sense, the question remains open, not because there is no answer, but because the answer changes depending on what we assume a human being fundamentally is.